value creation is the engine for exchange. Exchange creates wealth. The more we exchange with one another, the more wealth that's created. And a dollar doesn't end because I spend it. You take that dollar. Then you get to use that dollar again, and then someone else uses the dollar. The more times that exchanges hands, the more what we call in economy, velocity happens. Hard work with the wrong philosophy still equals bankruptcy.
The rapaciousness and mercenary nature of Wall Street and the things that they do make them impossible. We offer that expertise that does help level the playing field. At the end of the year, I calculate our average gain, and I mean, we just do really well.
Episode 2 of Money Revealed. We've got a great lineup for you today. Momentum is building, excitement is building, and I want you to remember you should share this with other people. This free viewing is up right now. Share it with other people that you think can benefit from this information, and let's just dive right into episode 2. When I think of our next guest, I think of the term maverick. Garrett Gunderson is a maverick in the financial industry. He wrote a book called Killing Sacred Cows, and let me tell you, he's got some really strong opinions that are at variance with conventional thinking when it comes to your finances and how to invest your finances and how to create a better future for yourself. His energy is inescapable. His brilliance will shine. You're gonna love this content. It has had a major impact on my life, and now I'm excited because it's gonna have a major impact on yours. Enjoy my interview with Garrett Gunderson. Garrett, thanks so much for taking some time out of your day to be with us. Give us a little background on you.
Grew up in a small coal mining town. Started my first business when I was 15 years old. Nothing too innovative, just detailing cars. Named it Garrett Gunderson's Car Care. My dad being a coal miner and my mom working in a credit union. I started detailing the repossessed vehicles. I started cleaning the surface vehicles for the mine. And then I went out and did a business competition. With only $600 in net income in the business, I made $500 for being the Rural Young Entrepreneur of the Year, and got pretty fascinated by just conveying messages and teaching, since it was really hard to kind of scrub bugs and tar and buff cars. But yeah, then I ended up winning $5,000 for being the Young Entrepreneur of the Year for the state of Utah. And unlike most teenagers, I actually decided I wanted to invest that money. You know, I want to get out of the small little town of Price and hit the big city of Salt Lake City, you know, the thriving financial metropolis. And so I went on a path trying to figure out how to invest that money. First time I invested, complete mistake, 18 years old. Because before I was 18, my mom, as an Italian, wasn't willing to sign off as a custodian. Their money management method was Folgers coffee cans, put cash in that thing, and put it in the cellar, right? And just forget about it, which for a lot of people, that's probably a better money management method than what I've seen. But for me, I wanted to do something bigger. And so when I was 18, I finally made my first investment. They promised me 18% returns. And if I just put a mere $70 a month away, I was gonna be a multimillionaire 40 years from then. And took an econometrics course in college and figured out there was no chance that was gonna happen. And in figuring that out, started asking more questions. And ironically, in asking the questions, got led to being into the financial industry when I was 19 years old, which may sound really cool, but I was just a product peddler. I sold life insurance, I sold mutual funds, and my job was just to bring warm bodies into the firm so that they could sell them something while I sat there and so-called learned, but that got me my start.
So you say you were a product peddler,
yeah.
But that's kind of masquerades as a
I said I was a financial planner.
Okay.
I said that. I was too embarrassed to admit I was a life insurance salesman at the time. My tie wasn't short enough, my belly wasn't big enough in my mind. I mean, I wanted to sound really cool, and the first 2 years was 98 and 99. I was a genius. I was a financial Einstein in my community because they're cashing out double E bonds and putting it in mutual funds, and Everybody made money in those 2 years. And so they're like, wow, this is great. Until 2000 came around and that started to change. And that's when I began to ask questions. And that's where I got rid of kind of these cliches that indoctrinated my mind, like it takes money to make money, or you're in it for the long haul, or the market's on sale, now's a good time to buy. Well, it was a bad time to buy when most people bought. You know, there's so many memes or kind of philosophies or myths that so many people still adopt because they just don't know any better. It's just what they're trained, taught, and educated to do. And it's unquestioned, even though there's been a massive failure rate, and we've watched this great financial experiment absolutely be decimated, yet people are still taking part in the experiment of buying and holding, setting money aside, hoping that it works out, budgeting to the point where they stop producing value because they're in a restrictive mindset, buying into scarcity, thinking that anyone that's wealthy has done something wrong. I mean, there's so many misnomers that lead people astray, and I think it comes from perspective first, because our perspective determines our action. And if people are in a perspective of scarcity, that there's not enough, and look, let's face it, there's times where when you look at people's environment, where they're born in a third world country, they're just trying to struggle to get food. They're trying to deal with crazy diseases like maybe ringworm or issues that are coming up. Man, that's all they're trying to do is survive. But there's other people that aren't under that same survival circumstance, but their mentality doesn't change. And because they're in survival, it becomes a selfish state of existence. That selfish state of existence is, what can I do for me? Neglecting the thought of what can I do for others, and because of that, they stay stuck, they stay poor, or maybe middle class at best, with Herculean effort to say, if I have the right work ethic or I work hard enough, I'll be better off. Hard work with the wrong philosophy still equals bankruptcy.
So based on what you're saying and you know, kind of as you're portraying all this, do we have, especially in North America right now, do we have a crisis as far as people moving toward retirement?
Retirement, first of all, it's time to redefine it. If we think about retirement, it means to take out of service. And the notion came up from the industrial age where people were working tirelessly, they're dying early because they've worked themselves to death, literally. And now we're thinking, oh, let's retire. And retirement age is 65, and now people are living 30 years past 65 instead of dying at age 60. And now they're supposed to live off their investments and Social Security and other programs like that. While they still have the ability to produce, they're not producing anymore, and they actually start to tax society. And even worse, the number one fear of a retiree is the fear of running out of money, according to USA Today.
Right.
So think about this. There's this dream sold to them. One day, someday, you can finally go on these trips. You can finally live the life you've always dreamed of. You could spend time with family. You know, let's dream big about it. And the planners get them thinking about that. Then they're told, yeah, just set your money aside, scrimp, pinch pennies till you get blisters on your fingers, not knowing that no one shrinks their way to wealth, but they just hand the money over to people they've never met. Because even the fund manager is more a different person than the product peddler, right? With stocks that they don't even know what those stocks are, what's happening in those boardrooms, the fees that are coming out of that, why they would make money, why they would lose money. They just kind of go through that process in hopes that one day it's going to work out. Yet 98% of them, when they turn 65, they're not economically independent. Meaning if they stop working, they don't have enough income coming in from all of their investments and Social Security or whatever programs are out there to cover their basic expenses. So now what do? Especially if they were looking forward to stopping at age 65, they stopped building skills. They stopped moving forward in a growing way. They thought maybe college was their only way to grow, and then afterwards it's just get a job and work hard, and then one day you'll have a pension that takes care of you. We've watched pensions collapse, partially because they were supposed to earn 8% a year, because we've been taught that the stock market's going to earn 8% a year since the year 2000 BC, but the reality is it hasn't done that. And when it doesn't do that, just 1% makes an exponential difference, and all of a sudden they thought they were heading to one destination. They're not even close to that, but at the same time they're ill-equipped, ill-prepared, and unfortunately they haven't been trained on how to produce more cash flow, how to expand their means to be more productive. They're not thinking in the world of value creation if they're in the retirement mindset. They're thinking in the thought process of preservation when they get there, and all that it was supposed to be, it's not. But now they're in a scary world, and it's a really difficult time because it's taxing the system.
So here's kind of the ultimate irony here. It seems like a huge contradiction. The big unknown is, when am I going to die?
Right.
Nobody knows that. I mean, and that's kind of like you're trying to calibrate to this unknown, which is a major variable in this equation.
Completely.
So I'm hearing what you're saying now, and I'm starting to add it up in my own mind. Wait a minute, I'm going to retire at a certain age, and then I want to have a certain lifestyle beyond that retirement to last me the rest of my life, but we don't know what the rest of your life is, so how do you calibrate to that? So suddenly there's people who are trying to act morally, meaning, hey, I'm doing the right thing. I'm putting away the money as I'm told to do.
Right.
I'm putting it
It's not
into
lack
the
of effort.
places. Yeah, I'm actually one of these people who actually isn't being a mindless, consumer that just throws caution to the wind. I'm putting the structure in place. I'm delaying gratification because I'm going to do the right thing, but it's all based on a pack of lies.
This is the contradiction at the heart of the matter. Everyone's hearing about this term, this phrase, financial freedom. Right. What is financial freedom? My definition of financial freedom is when money is not the primary reason or excuse why we do or don't do something. It's still a consideration, but not the primary consideration. When it's someone's primary consideration, they destroy all opportunity. You say, hey, would you like to do this? I can't afford it. That's the mantra. I don't have the time. I can't afford it. They're almost kind of cousins. But there's no freedom in that. And yet we think that if there's a certain amount of money in a bank account, that's going to create freedom. That doesn't create freedom, because there's people with a lot of money that are just afraid that they're going to lose that money. Or we've seen a situation unprecedented over the last couple decades. Interest rates have been so low that retirees are not generating the income that they expected. So great, if you're in business right now, you're borrowing money, rates have been great. That's awesome for you. Not such good news for the people that need to create that income, because they haven't really been trained in how to produce cash flow. They went their entire life just accumulating net worth, and net worth is relatively worthless if it can't be converted to cash. So here's the contradiction. Financial freedom is that's what's being professed, that's what's being taught. Mm-hmm. But let's examine the reality of that. Mm-hmm. It's actually financial bondage, because we hand our money over, we wait, we get there, and now our entire future is in the hands of a market that we don't control, people that are managing it that we don't know how they manage it, who's even managing it, what the fees are that are coming out, what's going to happen, because that dictates our income. And these are the three things that enslave retirees. Number one is interest rates. We've already talked about that. They remain low, your income remains low. Number two, taxes. We have a $20 trillion debt in the United States. How are we going to pay for that? One way might be taxes. If taxes go up when you're on a fixed income, your net income goes down. That means you have to start cutting things out of your life. Mm-hmm. I've met people that were multimillionaires on paper, $1 million paid off home, $1.5 million in their retirement. They're eating 2 meals a day. And not because they're intermittent fasting, simply because they're afraid if they spend too much. And all these trips they had planned, no, they're cutting that back, they're cutting that out. All these relationships they were gonna go cultivate and spend time with. You know what, when they're not in control of their money, and when all of a sudden that money starts to infringe upon their relationships because they don't choose to do things in the name of saving money, and most importantly, they've lost purpose, I think other than poor health, there's nothing that will help someone die faster than losing control of those three things. And the third thing of why they're in financial bondage is inflation. Inflation has continued to exist. If we went back to the 1980s, we interviewed everyone, hey, what's a good amount of money to have in a retirement plan? We might hear $250,000 from most people, maybe $500,000 for people that were really kind of out there, and those people that were really forward thinking might say $1 million. Yet today, that's not going to get you economically independent. $1 million will produce less in today's interest rate environment than the lower end of income earners. So now all of a sudden, you're a millionaire on paper, but living like a pauper. That's financial bondage. Financial freedom comes from a completely different place.
So this seems to all boil down to the philosophy of money, right? What's your view of reality relative to money? Why do you think that? And then what should you do, right? Those are the three foundational philosophical questions. It has to go all the way back to what we learn in childhood from our mothers, fathers, teachers, preachers, etc.
Yep.
So you have such context on this because you've made it the study of your life. How do you see it?
So money is a tool, and it was invented as an efficient way to exchange. But with that efficiency came complexity for people, because there are times where people are given something for nothing, slot machines, or just enough of a reward, or a story of someone that bought a stock and made it big. So we have to go to the foundational premise to begin. And that foundational piece is that there's two factions. One faction is people believe there's a finite amount of money, So if anyone has more money, that's less for me, okay? But here's the paradox, and let's go to the other side. Even if there were a finite amount of money, which they're printing it as you watch this, but even if there were a finite amount of money, there's an infinite number of times that money can exchange hands. And exchange hands because of goods, services, or experience. And if I said that more simply, it's really a matter of value creation. Value creation is the engine for exchange. When we stop creating value for one another, and let me get even more raw than this. There's a divinity to diversity, meaning that we all have different abilities, skills, preferences, talents. If we all could do all the same things, we wouldn't even exchange with one another. But wealth is actually built through unequal exchange. So for example, I wrote a book, right? And if I were to sell you that book for $20, you would only give me that $20 if you felt like the book was worth more than $20. I would only sell you that book if I felt like the book was worth less than $20 for me. So we actually could both walk away from that exchange wealthier. But most people don't believe that you could end up wealthier through exchange. They think that it's a win-lose, zero-sum game. So it's a competitive nature, it's a jealous nature. That's where scarcity becomes the rule, and entitlement becomes the crux of society. Feeling entitled to something else or feeling jealous. So instead of driving from what can I do to serve others, what can I do to solve problems, and by the way, the bigger the problem, the bigger the payoff. And if someone in scarcity sees a problem, they usually complain about it. They point it out. They talk about why it's going to ruin their lives or other people's lives. And they get caught up in this really complicated place called the external economy. The external economy, one thought isn't going to solve that entire thing. One motion isn't going to solve the entire economy. But what I like to look at instead is our personal economy. We'll have our own personal economy, our own network, our own relationships, our own ideas, and our own actions that we have control over on a day-to-day basis. So if instead of getting caught up in the overwhelming nature of everything that's going wrong in the world and complaining about it, we picked one area that we saw more clearly than everyone else, that we had a lesson or an ability to solve that structure or that issue, and we were willing to exchange with other people that were fantastic in that, if all of a sudden we started to focus there, instead of just pointing out the problem, coming up with a solution for the problem, there would be more wealth that's created because there would be more exchange that's facilitated. So think of it this way, exchange creates wealth. The more we exchange with one another, the more wealth that's created. And a dollar doesn't end because I spend it, you take that dollar. Then you get to use that dollar again, and then someone else uses the dollar. The more times that exchanges hands, the more what we call in economy, velocity happens. So quick economics lesson without getting complicated or putting anyone to sleep. It's just gross domestic product, that's the output of a country, divided by its money supply equals its velocity. So if we want to increase velocity, it's simply with the same amount of dollars, how can we get that to circulate more often amongst each other because we're creating value for one another, doing things that someone else isn't good at. I'm not good at organizing my garage. I found someone that loves it. They're passionate about it. They actually always work extra time there because I got a couple more things I want to work on. They love it. I once, when I got a review in the New York Post, they were saying, Gunderson's book talks about people doing things that they enjoy, but there's plenty of work that no one enjoys. And we see programs like Dirty Jobs and all this kind of stuff. And I kind of thought about that for a minute. And then I met a guy from Brigham City, Utah, who ran a sewage treatment plant, and he loved it. He was lit up by it. So there are sick enough people to, love the things that we hate. And I think this is how we redefine retirement. We retire from the things that we hate and embrace the things that we're very best at. And rather than thinking it takes money to make money and use that as a defeating declaration, like, I don't have money, I'm never going to make money. It doesn't take money to make money. It takes value. It takes two other forms of capital. Mental capital, which is our ideas, our knowledge, our wisdom, its systems, its tools, it's our unique insights, times relationship capital, people, networks, organizations, mentors, family, friends, and all we're doing, business is just the bridge between those two things. Our mental capital or ideas to relationship capital. So how can our ideas impact someone's life for the positive? So anyone that thinks they have a money problem, that's just a symptom. That's a symptom of the problem. Money's the receipt. It's on the other side of the equation. It's a byproduct. What drives money is mental and relationship capital. So you're one idea or one relationship away from the next dollar that you make or the next level of prosperity that you can have. And if we could focus on that, what do we bring to the world versus what does the world owe us? What can we do to contribute right now, even if we have no dollars in our pocket? I mean, I started my very first job that I ever had was a dump site where they were doing a grand opening. It was 105 degrees and we had to drive these nails into a tent that was in rock that took us forever with sledgehammers. But it got me some money. Before that, I remember pulling weeds for Mrs. Oliveto. I got paid, I think, $2 for the entire day. But it just taught me, I want to do something different. What else can I do that's better? And I really realized that in the old days, we were paid for our brawn. Maybe or for being part of the Lucky Sperm Club and you were born into royalty. And sure, there was a lot more of that back then than there is now. But I've met kids that aren't even teenagers yet that are worth $1 million, not because they inherited money, not because they came from money, but because of the advent of the internet. I met someone recently that he hosts and puts on these huge conventions for Minecraft and Lego. That started because his daughter wanted to film YouTube videos. One of our mutual friends, his son had a $590,000 revenue at 16 years old, starting a business with less than $1,000. The problem is most people don't even know that this is a possibility. They don't recognize this exists because they're confused about money. And they wake up with the wrong question in their mind. How can I make more money? How can I make more money? May tend to move you towards some level of action. But a more powerful question would be, what issues are there in the world that I could solve? What actions can I take to contribute? What ways do I feel engaged and compelled to do something? And sometimes you do that without financial reward. You just contribute to someone because as you become a contributor and you're thinking about value creation, you leave scarcity and embrace abundance in something I call the producer paradigm, where you finally seek to create more value in the world than you take from it. People that are poor, they're in survival, so they're not necessarily thinking about contributing more to the world than they take. They're thinking about just making it another day. That's a mindset. People stay in the survival mindset that don't even have to stay there, and they unfortunately get stuck in the consumer condition where they look to extract more from the world than they give, and that is never an equation for wealth or exchange, and it's why they start to have envy, frustration, anger, and spend more time complaining than doing.
So it sounds very much like the entrepreneurial disposition, about saying, hey, let me figure out a way to add value and create income to myself as a result of adding value. Now let's maybe look at the person who has a job,
Right.
decent job, but it's steady paycheck based on fixed amount of working hours that they do that can be characterized maybe as a career for a lot of people. How should they be thinking about this?
As an intrapreneur.
What's an intrapreneur?
An entrepreneur is someone that works inside of an organization. But what they do is they abandon this time and effort industrial age economy where you just punch a clock, you show up, and you trade time for dollars. And instead, they start considering how they contribute to the bottom line of the organization. And rather than being an owner, because ownership a lot of times means, hey, if you're sued, now you're involved in that lawsuit. Hey, if you need to add a capital call because they're short on cash that month, you got to infuse cash. If all of a sudden things are tight, you're not taking your paycheck. There's not a lot of people that have kind of the desire to do that. And so they can be entrepreneurial where they say, I'd like to have more upside potential. If I can contribute more to this firm, if I can contribute and understand how I direct and improve the bottom line, I'd like to have a little piece of that. So now they're part of a community, they're part of a culture, they're part of an organization where they could thrive. See, some people that are more engineering minded and methodical don't love starting a business because they think of all the number of things that most business owners, we have enough ignorance and arrogance to just plow through and then we deal with it when it comes up. They're pretty smart to see that ahead of time. A lot of times they can thrive within an organization. And I really feel like we're in this economy right now where it doesn't take massive amounts of money to start a business. There's so many people that have side hustles, right? I mean, I have people I know that they rented out 2 rooms in their house through Airbnb, and that started cash flowing, and they bought their first real estate property that was for a rental. I know other people that said, hey, I have good artistic, qualities, so I'm gonna go and put my services on different online platforms, and all of a sudden they're getting clients and they do that work, graphic work at night, right? So there's so many things and platforms that great entrepreneurs have brought to us that an entrepreneur or someone that doesn't have the stomach to just take all that responsibility on themselves can now participate in to increase their income. Because all the financial books in the world try to get you to save, sacrifice, delay, defer, budget, and that just takes extraordinary amounts of discipline and energy. And if we're in shrinking-based thinking that's about restriction instead of production, that is a harmful place to be. Instead, I'd like people to think about how they can expand their means, because we've all heard to live within our means, which usually thinks, let's have life suck. Let's cut out good things that we enjoy. And you know what? After meeting you, I just enjoy finer things in life. My dad showed me boxed wine when I was young. You showed me bottled wine, and not only just any bottles, you know, and then you showed me dark chocolate. I grew up on milk chocolate. All of a sudden, those things, a luxury once enjoyed, becomes a necessity. But the key is, yes, it's important to live within your means, but continually seek to expand your means. Because if I'm telling you to pinch pennies to save 10% of your income, and then try to get through Herculean efforts, once again, 10% return, which is really hard to get for the majority of people in today's world that don't own a business, that's 10% of 10%. But if instead we figured out, what are your best qualities? What are the things and skills and abilities you have that you could cultivate and grow, and then you invest back into yourself? It doesn't show up on a piece of paper initially, and that's the tough thing. When I put money in an investment, like a mutual fund or a savings account or a certificate of deposit, I get a statement. When I invest into my own skills, my own abilities, I'm now relying more on myself, which can be a scary thing. But at the same time, it's going to take a little bit longer to pay off. But if it does, imagine if I increase my income by 25%. That's 25% of 100%. Expanding our means is so critical, and as soon as we forget to do that, or we start shrinking because retirement's around the corner, or we stop thinking about enhancing our skills, we are in a disruptive time and place. Before, you could have the same skill for 20, 30 years. Now there's people that maybe learned to drive, but now there's driverless vehicles coming out. They're going to have a new set of skills. And this is the toughest part. The toughest part and the crux of society comes down to this thing right here. That if we are dependent upon an income, and that is what's going to put food on the table or take care of our family, it is super difficult to make decisions that are the right decisions in the long term due to that scarce feeling in the short term. As a matter of fact, to go deeper in this, this is why great and even good people do bad things. Because they're so concerned about their family, which is noble, but at the same time, they don't see the outcomes and what they're creating in the world that could be destructive, and they don't want to question it because it could jeopardize the very nature of their income. What I want to see is people liberated where they create economic independence as their foundational piece. Get there in 3 years or 7 years, not wait for 30 years. Have enough cash flow coming in that they have choice. They have options. They have an inkling of what that freedom feels like. And now they can make more powerful choices, swing for the fences in what they're up to, choose not to do something if it's not ethical or moral for themselves, or if they see something that excites them, they have a permission slip to go for it.
You wrote a New York Times bestselling book, Killing Sacred Cows, and it created quite a stir, quite a controversy. What's the theme of the book?
That there's 9 really subtle financial myths or financial lies that are super hard to detect. The reason they're difficult to detect is because we look through the lens of the myth. We look through the lens of the lie, and there's a lot of marketing to support that. So if we continue to follow these things, the first one is the myth of the finite pie. There's only so much to go around, and if someone else has something, there's less for us. And we can go hundreds of years back, and Thomas Malthus would say, we're going to run out of food. We're going to run out of land. But he didn't consider innovation. He didn't consider other factors that came up. And so that's the first chapter, but there's things in there like, you know, you're in it for the long haul, or it takes money to make money, or a penny saved is a penny earned, that are so common that they're memes within society that just go unquestioned. Beliefs that we go, oh yeah, you just are supposed to save early. You're supposed to save often. You're supposed to save regardless of what happens. And in the long haul, it'll all be okay. And we get convinced of that, and if we follow it, it starts to slowly rob and confiscate our well-being, our financial lives, and most importantly, it has people abdicate responsibility, which leaves them in a dangerous place financially. And so that book helps them to detect, understand, and avoid the subtle lies that are hard to see. Because obvious lies, pretty easy for us to avoid. If I said, oh, I live on Mars, I just live on Mars, we just laugh, right? But if on the other hand, I'm like, no, the market goes up and down and it's averaged 10%. But then we just look, where's that a subtle lie? Well, let's look at averages for a minute. If I had 100 grand and it loses 10%, we know that becomes 90 grand. But the next year, if it gains 10% and we turn on the news, they're like, good news, the market's rallied, we're back up, we've recovered. We didn't recover the time that was lost. That's the first subtle lie. The second is if we earn 10% on 90 grand, we're only at 99 grand if there were no fees, right? And those fees come out whether you make money or not. So our average return was 0, but our actual return was negative. And this is a subtle lie that most people don't recognize. Here's another subtle lie using the same analogy. If you have your money in an index fund like the S&P 500, and one of these companies in the S&P 500 gets disrupted by a new technology and it goes out of business, you lost that money on that portion forevermore. They're just going to plug another company in the S&P 500 and tell you the average is what the new 500 companies did, not the companies you had at the time you were invested. Another subtle lie that has a big impact because you go, oh, well, that's a minor. Well, this is how minor it isn't. It's pretty major. If I have money and I'm investing and I can earn this great rate of return, if I can get that 10%, I have 100 grand, over 30 years it grows to $1.74 million. That's awesome. But if you have a 0.85% fee, so less than 1%, it doesn't grow to 1.74 million. It grows to 1.4 million. That's a $340,000 difference for less than 1% because it's exponential, it's logarithmic, and when we think in percentages, it doesn't mean dollar for dollar because of the compounding effect. So these are the types of things that end up where people are disappointed at retirement. They're not as far along as they thought, and they follow this kind of equation. Like the old belief of wealth, the industrial age belief that is still kind of the financial experiment that's still harming people, is that wealth is a function of three things. How much money you're willing to put away, so that's it takes money to make money. What kind of return you can get, and I'm sure everyone's heard, high risk equals high return. That's so funny. The people telling us high risk equals high return are taking no risk because they're making money on our money whether we make it or not. As a matter of fact, look at the industry giants that lost almost everything and the government bailed them out. How does the government bail them out? Our tax dollars. It was our money that was lost, and guess what? Some of them still got their pensions or still got their parachutes or still got their bonuses even though they didn't perform. This is where money becomes confusing, where people start thinking about I get mine regardless of what happens to anyone else. That is a cloudy level of thinking. So, when we start to examine this just a little bit closer, there's huge impact on just a few minor things.
So I one time went to ABC Studios in New York City, and you were being interviewed on a news show on money at ABC, and they wanted to dig into the 401k issue. Right. Which I think is a part of your book, right?
Yes.
So talk about your perceptions of 401k because it is a sacred cow. I mean, that is the vehicle that's supposed to, for the working person that's getting paycheck to paycheck to paycheck, they're putting pieces away over time, and that's how they're supposed to be accumulating for retirement. And of course, it's celebrated, it's promoted by employers, et cetera. And you come in, and in your book, you say it's a horrible idea.
Yeah. I put on the cover 401k hoax.
Yes,
Not just any horrible idea, I just went after it. And by the way, when I first did that and hired a PR firm, they were having a hard time booking me on anything. Because it was at a time that 401ks were still heralded as the great retirement plan. But you know what? Retirement plans actually slow down the process of achieving economic independence, or what some people might call retirement. Now, it's maybe faster than doing nothing, but it's slower than focusing on cash flow. And part of the reason I said 401ks were problematic, and by the way, that was the 11th time I was on that program. The first time I was on, it was during a recession.
So what was the reaction of the host in this first show?
Oh yeah, when I said stop funding the 401k, these were her exact words. We usually don't get that kind of advice around here. And I said, right, that's why you have me on as a guest. We're gonna get somewhere today. And then I said, instead of funding that, they should do two other things, because this was a business program. I said, they should give their best employee a raise, because what will that say to someone during a recession?
And this is in a recession.
In a recession. And they said, well, how would they do that? I said, remember, they're not funding their retirement plan. They're gonna fund their most important asset, because the only assets in this world are people. Everything else is stuff to serve people. So let's go directly to the source. And then I said, the second thing is, they should go back to school, was kind of how I said it. But what I meant was, find an area where they could really dial in one of their major skill sets, because everyone else is going to be shrinking and recessing, because a recession means we stop exchanging with one another. That's what a recession is. We lose consumer confidence, or is what they would call it on the news, and it means people start exchanging more slowly. That slows down velocity, so the economy means we have less output, going back to the original equation of GDP divided by money supply equals velocity. When we slow down exchange, it means people aren't serving each other as much. And unfortunately, a recession becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Because some people don't even know there's a recession until they turn on the news. They're like, oh my God, we're in a recession. Then they act recessionary. They call their family, they call their friends, their conversations change. And wealth is actually built through conversation. I mean, some of the people that have built the most magnificent things, they didn't lift anything, they didn't do anything. They thought with their mind and created a vision.
Right.
Vision is the rarest commodity on the planet. It's not vision meaning some mission statement on a wall that means nothing, right? Those mission statements say, we're good with customer service, and we care about our customers, we put them first. That's not a vision. A vision is putting the man on the moon and returning them safely home within the decade. For me, it's 1 million people freed where they are economically independent by the time I hit the grave. That's a vision. And if we spend time focused on our vision, that creates the context, or that creates the container in which the value that we're going to build. So some people, they just say wild and crazy things, but they're committed to it. So they get other people excited and enrolled, and then you're like, this is like a miracle that ever came about. When I'm in New York City, I'm like, this is a freaking miracle. How did this city get built? Someone thought of the idea first. People that are poor, though, don't even have the inkling or the vision or the abundance to think about that vision, because they're in survival. That's their container, just to survive.
So this implies that as we discussed, there's a philosophy of money, there's a psychology that trails that philosophy also, because you're talking about consumer confidence, for example.
Right.
I mean, why is it important that people have to, isn't it just a factual black and white thing? Why is it that consumer confidence should be important? But literally the psychology of the marketplace.
Exchange gets slowed down. And so, here's why I'm not a big fan of 401ks or, RSPs for the Canadians or superannuitization plans in Australia, like we go through it, just government qualified plans, is because it has us fund other people's dreams and visions before we've even figured out the best that we have to offer the world yet. That somehow college is when it ends, or high school, or that school is only when we're in a classroom, rather than a daily learning lab that we go through life, continuing to figure out, looking at the end of the day and saying, what could I have done that would have allowed me to learn more, to impact more? And I just use a simple impact equation. These are my two questions. How could I have reached more people? How could I have impacted those people more deeply? That's the question. I'm asking that on a regular basis, and that comes down to collaboration. That comes down to cooperative competition and not just trying to put other people out of business. I mean, a lot of my business grows because I actually support the industry rather than just building something to myself and holding it secret. I mean, I had this company early on where I would allow financial people to come and shadow me, see exactly how I was doing what I was doing. Because I was in my 20s and they didn't know, how are you doing this at such a young age? I'm like, oh, just pay me, come and watch. Then I put together study groups. And I used to give all the secrets. I didn't hold anything back. I wasn't like, I'm not going to tell them this one thing that I do, because then I have that safeguard. And I just told them everything. And you know what happened? They would come to me and say, I've got a client I really think you could help me out with. How did you figure this out? That's awesome. And then we would talk. And then in talking, I would think of more ideas. And they'd say, have you ever thought about doing it this way? And the scarcity has us stop sharing our ideas in fear that someone's going to steal it from us. But we actually rob ourselves by not sharing them.
There's one thing, a data point that you told me when we met earlier on about 401ks that literally caused me within the week, I think, to liquidate mine. Pay the penalty, just get out. And that was the idea that I'm not really personally holding those funds. Talk about that.
So it's a tax code. So the government actually owns the plan and you're the beneficiary of the plan. So it'll say FBO, that's the 3 words, or the 3 letters, for benefit of. So it's the 401k plan for benefit of Patrick Gentempo. So if they want to change the code, they want to change the rules, they're fine to do that. If the government doesn't feel like they've got enough tax income coming in, they could add a sundry tax to that, and they could just do that with the stroke of a pen. It's not a private contract. It's not really, it's not like private property. This is the government saying, yeah, we've created this provision, and the IRS allows this, but they could change that. You don't get a vote in that. You don't get a say in that. So that really concerns me to give 100% control, because I'm a business guy. And for me, if someone said, hey, I want to be in a partnership with you, here's the rules of the partnership. You put in the money, and then I'll take a percentage, but if you want out of the partnership early, I want 10% more than our agreed upon percentage. And in the future, when we sell the company or you go to liquidate any of this, my percentage partnership will depend upon my economic condition, not yours. So the government could say, hey, in 30 years, the tax rates might be 60, 70%. If that seems high, realize this little thing that came out in 1913, the US Revenue Act, was going to be temporary. You'd have to earn quite a bit of money adjusted for inflation to even get hit with the 6% or 8% tax. But eventually, there was a time where we had over a 90% top tax rate in the United States on the marginal side. And on average, it's been well over 50%. So historically, at the time of this filming, we're in a historically low tax bracket. So what if we're deferring that tax into the future? And simply because of inflation, we have to have a lot more money in the future just to live the same lifestyle. Inflation actually hurts us from a tax perspective, because we have to have more dollars, but those dollars are now taxed at a higher level when we have more money in the future. But someone that's a millionaire today, that's a different thing than in 1913. A millionaire in 1913 could buy 10 times, 20 times more than a millionaire today with the same dollars.
Yeah, and what's interesting is that I have, at least for me, no problem imagining that if the government gets itself into financial trouble, which it does, it's almost unavoidable, that they'll look at such assets and say, you know, because this is the conversation.
Remember Cyprus?
Yeah.
Where they're just like, oh, you got more than this amount, we're taking that.
Yeah, and that's exactly what almost has to happen in a sense to solve the problem. Well, we have all this 401k money here. You know, we will add some kind of a tax in addition.
Sundry tax is what they'll probably call it.
People will take a haircut, but everybody will share the burden, et cetera, et cetera. After all the toil, all the fees you paid from what you're invested in that 401k, the years you put into it, et cetera, you finally get to the point you're saying, hey, I deferred my gratification all these years, didn't do certain things for my children, didn't do certain things for my spouse or myself, but I was morally doing the right thing to be able to create a future of independence, so I wouldn't have to depend on other people. And then what happens, you're at the risk, or you're at the mercy, basically, to say, well, this is held for your benefit. And we know that in the beginning when you signed up for it, these were the terms, but hey, we screwed up the last 20 or 30 years. We're going to take a bigger chunk out than what you thought we might.
And here's my bigger concern.
Yeah.
Did you know that the majority of 401ks now, when you're an employee, you're automatically enrolled? You have to opt out. You don't have to sign to get in. It's just automatic enrollment, because taking care. And look, 401ks are far inferior than the pensions were. It's just that pensions didn't make it.
Right.
And this took the burden of responsibility off the employer. But this is the big lie. People are being told this will save you tax. You put in $10,000 to this plan, you'll pay $3,000 less this year. But the tax savings isn't in your pocket.
No.
It's stuck inside of the plan, and you're at a disadvantage, because if you take that $10,000 out the next day, it's not a $3,000 cost, it's a $4,000 cost. And if you take it out 30 years from now, what if taxes have gone up? It could be a $6,000 cost. And so it is not a tax savings, it is a tax deferral.
Right, and you didn't have use of the capital in the meantime, which is the big deal.
And yeah, so let's say a good opportunity comes along. Like, this is where I get frustrated. I see people trying to do the right things. They're working hard, and then they're setting money aside. And then they confide in me with their finances. And when I talk to them, I see these really high interest rate loans. I'm like, well, what did your 401k do in the last few years? And the 401k didn't perform higher than the loan costed them. So I'm going, why are we putting money into a plan that we don't control, that has a lot of variables and a lot of expenses and isn't creating cash flow and is like all those kind of things, when we could have a more guaranteed path to cash flow by paying off a loan that is a guaranteed cost?
Right.
Because someone's getting paid a commission for setting up the 401k plan. And it's hard even for good people to see the right thing to do in that situation, because they're just saying, no, you need to max fund this, it saves you tax. I once had someone interview me on a podcast that said, hey, you should put your money in an IRA with the tax savings, you go buy one of Garrett's programs. I was like, That's not actually true because the money's stuck in the plan, not in their pocket. And I'm not one that's going to promote that they fund those types of things. I want people to invest in themselves. That's the biggest message. And I know that sounds cliched to a little degree, but let's get deeper about that. Because even saying dollars follow value, so create more value, someone in survival probably wants to hit me in the face when I say that. Like, it's hard sometimes to figure out what is value. But value is perspective, and it's what someone else's perspective is. So we have to understand, what is it we can provide that's valuable to others that we're capable of doing? Because I know people that preach the word passion all the time. And the problem is passion alone can lead to bitterness. Passion can lead you astray or even make you broke. It's kind of like putting fuel in the wrong place without a tank, and then everything bursts into flames and it crashes. That happens if people are in a hobby that they're passionate about, thinking it's a business. They're like, but I was told that if I'm just passionate, I'll be rich. No, passion is a part of the equation, is helpful to accelerate, to be fueled, to deal with the minutia, to deal with the tough days, because this whole path is hard, easy, not easy, hard. People that are living the easy, hard path, they just sleep in, eat what they want, don't think about their finances, just shovel the money off, work hard, come home, go back. It's just they get into routines and they're not addressing difficult things in life, which might lead to family situations. I mean, there's a lot of things when we're living easy that things get harder. Our health starts to be problematic, you know, all that kind of stuff. Hard, easy says it takes courage to confront your finances. It takes courage, it takes effort to look over these things and learn some of these things, to watch this right now. But if you do the hard work now, life gets easier. So the set it and forget it in a 401k is easy, hard. Hard, easy is to say, should I be paying off a loan? Should I be investing in more skills for myself because I could get paid more if I did that? Should I be, just setting money aside so I have enough liquidity to handle financial surprises that are lurking in the corner? Because we're all in store for financial surprises in our life. We just don't know when or how severe. I believe 90% of them could be alleviated, or at least not derail people with basic financial decisions. Like, number one, pay yourself first. Every time you take a paycheck, put it into a separate account, a portion of that money, so you're building some liquidity. Instead of automatically investing, I believe in automatically saving and deliberately investing. Be mindful of your investments. Don't try to learn every investment that's out there. Andrew Carnegie said, put all your eggs in one basket and watch it like a hawk. Someone that you know of or studied, B.J. Palmer, said, put all your eggs in one basket and insure it well. The people that make the most money invest in what they know, and they don't gamble with everything else. We've collapsed those terms. What people say is investing in their world is a lot of times gambling. And here's how you know it's gambling. Risk isn't in the investment. Risk is in the investor. So you have to ask yourself, what kind of investor am I? Am I investing with knowledge? And if I'm not, it's time to invest in building that knowledge instead of speculating, instead of taking risk, instead of handing my money over, instead of just hoping that it's going to work out one day. And you don't have to learn as much as you think. You just have to be really good at a few things.
So I think this is like a highlight with the idea of saying, because again, it sounds subtle, but it's truly a revolution. Save automatically, invest intentionally.
Yes.
Yet prevailing wisdom and structures as they're set up for working people is sort of the opposite. Or maybe they blend it and say, we're going to invest automatically and that's my savings.
Right.
And that's a mistake.
But when there's calamity and when there's chaos, you watch that go down, people get dragged into scarcity.
Oh yeah.
I believe never invest in something that creates a scarcity mindset. Because your greatest asset isn't a stock, not a bond, not even a business, not even a piece of real estate. It's you. And if all of a sudden you invest in other things that derail you, distract you, they're distractions disguised as opportunities, and now all of a sudden you start getting frustrated or you're fearful, that crowds out creative and productive thinking. That scarcity destroys wealth. That's why no amount of luck or saving or no amount of discipline or no return or no financial advisor can save someone in scarcity. Scarcity inevitably destroys wealth. It's the wrong viewpoint, right? So effort won't solve that. It has to be a shift. And then when we get that shift and we start thinking about, okay, what can I do to solve problems? What can I do to serve? What can I do to deliver value? What can I do to increase some financial savvy and intelligence? If I don't know where to invest, why don't I just stay in cash? And some people never have to invest in anything that has risk or speculation. The majority of my money goes into something that I personally call cash flow banking. It's been my never fail me strategy. I've invested and made mistakes in real estate, oil and gas, IPOs. I even had a hard money lending fund. None of that was in alignment with my investor DNA. My investor DNA is my values, it's my competencies, it's my drivers combined for focus. And when I got diversified, I found out it was diversification, not diversification. And I was prematurely diversifying. And usually when you add the word premature to something, not a good thing, right? Like premature babies is what I'm talking about there, right? So all of a sudden we're taking money that in something we know, like our skill set or our own business or something like that, and we go give it to someone else, and they give it to someone else. The further that goes along the line, I call that the value chain, the further it away is from the center, the more confusing money becomes, and the more risk we take. And the higher the risk, the higher the chance of loss, because risk defined is chance of loss. I believe in taking lower risk and getting better returns because of information, because of investor DNA, because of a good, solid financial team. I mean, the Rockefellers got this. The Vanderbilts had no clue. I mean, they knew how to make money. They had more money than the US Treasury. But it was 50-some years after Cornelius died that the first Vanderbilt died broke. And by the way, Cornelius's first son actually took and grew that wealth for 9 years. So they actually doubled their estate, but then it destroyed. And then they went and bought real estate they knew nothing about, and mansions, and there were no buyers for it. You know, if you've heard of the Breakers, and their mansions in Manhattan got torn down. Rhode Island, they have one that's now like, you know, something you go see like as a museum tour. And Anderson Cooper is a Vanderbilt who didn't even receive money as an heir because they destroyed that wealth because they didn't understand. It takes a team. No one can be an expert in everything. We have to utilize people and understand so it's customized and tailored so we can make more informed decisions, but never give up control of the final choice. Utilize these people to give you the options. Stay in the driver's seat, because if you do, you'll have 3 feelings. Peace of mind, because you know what you're doing. Financial clarity, so that you can move forward powerfully. And more confidence, so you can focus on other things that are really important in driving value and building wealth. When people invest in things they don't know, it's a distraction. When they invest in things that are risky and it doesn't work out, it derails them for a time. It starts to actually chip away at their legacy. And even worse, sometimes it destroys their faith in investing altogether, so they just say, I'm never doing anything again, I'm just stuffing it under my bed. And for some people, I guess that actually becomes a better thing than losing over and over again. This infuriates me to watch financial professionals say things like dollar cost average, like you're in it for the long haul, like don't worry, the market goes up, the market goes down. All those kind of things, that's crazy. We would never run a business like that if we're a good business owner. We would never say, we're putting money into marketing no matter what happens. We're not going to measure that. Hopefully it works out. You just go bankrupt. And that's the same level of financial intelligence most people have. It's on the level of an economic toddler, right? We never mature past that, because in school, we're not giving a money manual, you know? It's like we're taking money home and we just got to navigate and figure that out on our own. And for some people, it just feels confusing, it feels overwhelming. They feel like there's a lot of sharks, there's a lot of shysters, they make mistakes, so they get more closely guarded, and they're just confused, and that leads to inaction, that leads to scarcity, that destroys wealth, it destroys velocity, value, exchange, and here's the situation we face today. All that, let's wrap that around retirement, where you might live for 30 years after you're no longer in control over your life.
So the term financial intelligence is literally what Money Revealed is all about.
Right.
Because if you look at the enormous effort spent over a lifetime to generate money, to make a living, if you will, to plan for a future, which is retirement or whatever else you think your future plan is, can you imagine that people go through the education they need, the vocation, getting into a job or owning a business. They do all this work to start generating money, but then the sum total is they don't do the extra 10% of effort to now figure out, okay, maybe I need to get some intelligence around this, and that everything goes to a point and the wheels come off because you never bothered to educate yourself,
right,
and to think through these things. And this is the thing, and I'm guilty as charged on this, and this was literally a financial miracle in my life in meeting you, is that I am a thinker, and I really think through everything. My intellectual life is maybe one of the most important categories of my life. And I spent so much time thinking about life in every dimension, but I delegated this to the people who said, I am an expert in these areas.
Well, it's out of term. We relegate it.
Yeah, and that's actually, exactly. To me, I was being a good executive and delegate. It was a relegation, though.
Right.
And the upshot was, as I sat with you the first time we met, and you started to communicate to me the premises around money from which you operated, because we shared so many other aspects of philosophy together.
Right.
What you did is you took that and applied it to money and went deep with it, and with an enormous amount of passion. I said, you know what? I'm passionate about what I do in the world and the businesses that I build and develop, and relegated this part just automatically because, oh, there's a structure in place in the world, and I cannot believe the dogma that I embrace. I'm embarrassed to actually tell you. I mean, I embraced dogma around this, and I felt like you took blinders off of me and had me see the light around this. So Money Revealed is a byproduct of the realization that if someone like me can be hypnotized and be unaware or blinded to reality here, well, then I'm not the only one. Right. And quite frankly, for many people, it became too late when they found out. And we're hoping to reach many people now where it's not too late, so they can have a transformation in their life in this very important category called your financial life.
Yeah, when I was 18 making a financial mistake, investing $70 a month, and 3 months later figuring out it wasn't going to work out. Not only did it have no chance, 0%, no statistical relevance of actually being a multimillionaire from it, had a 98.7% chance of failing altogether based upon the fee structure and the actual performance from previous years. So it was a huge awakening. So I lost money. But that wasn't the last of my mistakes. I just made the mistakes quicker. I've met financial people that tell me, I've been in the business for 40 years. After asking 3 or 4 questions, I realized they've been in the business for 1 year and they've done the same thing for 40 times over. They never question it. I admit, I've lost money in real estate, oil and gas. I've made the mistakes. The difference was I asked, what can I learn from these mistakes? What are the biggest lessons? And what could I do to help other people not make the same mistakes and give them tools and strategies? And you know, you've referred me people that have been with me 6, 7 years. It's the first 7-year period of life where they didn't lose money, because we're protecting the downside. We're thinking about risk management. But all of this said, you know, if there's 10% of money that people think, okay, I got to save 10%, where I'm going to find that money? When I lost money in the stock market for my clients in the year 2000, fortunately, I got all but one of their money completely out of the market by May of 2000, with help and guidance from a great mentor, Stephen Harrop, who was a money manager, now my professor while I'm at school. We get their money out. They avoid 2.5 more years of downturn, and we figure out a lot. During that time, I asked a question, and it was mainly out of pain, because I remember going to a family reunion, and I remember just being treated differently, because I was all of a sudden losing family's money, right? All my family became clients just out of, hey, this is our nephew, this is our grandson, this is, you know, and you could tell they were uneasy about it, but they loved me, so I was like, I've got to figure out something better than looking them in the eye and saying, you're in it for the long haul. Hey, the market's on sale, buy more. Like, well, that sell kind of sucked because they had already bought and they couldn't trade it in for the new price. That's the thing that's so stupid about the market's on sale. So I asked a question that I don't even think you're allowed to say out loud in the world of finance. I said, what is guaranteed? Because almost everything they say around guarantees is past performance, not an indicator of future results. There are no guarantees. But by asking that question, it changed the game for me. First off, I recognized the game was rigged against people. Here's how it's rigged against them. If you're a financial institution, what do you want from people?
Their money.
How often?
As often as possible.
How long do you want to hold on to it for?
As long as possible.
How much do you want to give them back if they want to take a withdrawal?
As little as possible.
That's why people are not being wealthy. They're in the money times rate times time. I left out time earlier. Money times rate times time. Just set money aside, take a bunch of risk, and wait for a long period of time. This is why 401ks are so effective. Automatically being taken from your paycheck. Not just your money, the government's money that they're getting a fee off of as the financial advisor. Penalties if you want to get to your money early. And when you finally get to so-called retirement, leave the nest egg there. Just take the interest. You see that?
Yeah.
So when I said, what's guaranteed, this was the epiphany. I was like, what's guaranteed is if we could figure out inefficiencies in someone's plan, on insurance, if they have duplicate coverages and costs, an improper structure. You introduced me to someone years and years ago. I sat down with them in Chicago. What I found out was keeping the same insurance company, we changed some things, just tweaked their deductibles, coordinated a couple pieces. increased their umbrella policy and lowered their limits on other things. This was just their car, home, and liability policies. We saved them $250 a year. Not too bad. Paid for brunch at the Four Seasons for us that day, though. But here's what was great. I got them $10 million more of liability coverage just by having that intelligence, right? So that was one area. That's a guaranteed savings, $250. What's a bigger one? Investment fees. A lot of managed funds don't outperform the index funds. So just to say, let's have accountability around our management fees, because we talked about going from 10% to 9.15% and having it be hundreds of thousands of dollars of difference over 30 years. That's a big deal. But here's two other areas where I saw the biggest guarantees. One was interest. Most people overpay interest because they don't know the 4 C's. One, you got to have a good credit score. Get above 780. If you get a good credit score, you can then renegotiate interest rates. Get good collateral. If you finance a car, instead of just using a credit card, you can go from 1.9% rather than 8, 10, 15, 17%. So we've got credit, we've got collateral, that could improve it. We've got cash flow reporting, just knowing how to report to the bank. And the 4th C is the right connections. Someone you referred to me, once again, they ended up buying a building with 10% down rather than 20% down. That was more cash in their hand. Rather than paying 6%, they got 4.125%. It was the 4 C's, that last one being the connection. So imagine if you could have the exact same loans, restructured, renegotiated, and identifying how to pay them off more efficiently. You could end up shaving off 1/3 of the interest you pay and keeping that money rather than giving it to an institution. That's guaranteed. But the 4th I is the big one, the IRS. And I know there's people watching this from all over the world, so I'm just using the I to keep it I's, you know, insurance, investments, interest, and now IRS. But in our estimation, after, you know, meeting with thousands of people, we believe 93% of business owners specifically are overpaying tax. And not by a little, by a lot. We've had people overpay their taxes over $1 million a year. We've had people overpay their taxes by $951 a year. We've had people go back 3 years and have the IRS cut them a check by amending their returns. But all this pay yourself first doesn't mean you have to cut back and sacrifice. It means with a little bit of insight and framework, you can reclaim cash that's rightfully yours, put it back into your pocket, get Wall Street out of your pocket, get the IRS out of your pocket. You'll still pay your fair share. There's no evasion here whatsoever. It's just simply stop tipping the government. Give them what's required and keep the rest. And when you do that, you can start automatically saving. And then when that starts building up and you figure out your investor DNA and you know what investments make sense for who you are, instead of always being invested like we've always been taught, I believe in something different. I read an article called Predatory Investing. Don't love the name of the title, but Predatory Investing talked about Ted Turner sitting in massive amounts of cash. And then when the economy changed, when times were tight, when people were just needing a bailout, he bought companies. He bought sports teams. He bought land. And then he'd move back into cash. And he would just wait. And you know what? During recessionary times are the biggest opportunities to grow your wealth if you have liquid money. If you're illiquid, recessions transfer wealth. And I look, I know when we turn on the news says, oh, there's been billions of dollars lost in retirement plans. Money isn't lost. No one's burning the money up. It's transferred. This is a deception. The world feels like, oh, we lost, everybody else lost. No. You transferred your money to someone who was in the know because you paid the ignorance tax. We're here to make sure the ignorance tax goes away as much as possible so that people could have a better life. They could become economically independent, not waiting 30 years. But I've disseminated, I've studied since 1998. I said, what's the simplest framework that is not only predictable, it's inevitable that if someone follows it, they can achieve economic independence, and how long would that take? I met a few insane people that got there within a year. You know, I think of people that have done that because they just worked 20 extra hours a week, they lived off food storage, they just did what it took. But there's people that are frugal right now that can get economically independent in 3 years, where most people wait till they're 65 or 30 years from now. Maybe like me, it took 7 years. It was because I just think luxuries are now necessities, you know? And I like the finer things, even though I grew up in this coal mining town. So part of that is just you begin by reclaiming your cash. So you boost your profits, keep more of the dollars you make. Then second, you figure out what that number is per month that you have to get in income that comes in if you don't show up to the job or to the business. So that could be investment income, that could be entrepreneurial income that is because of a team, but it still means that you need to monitor it and manage it. But once you identify that number, then you reverse engineer and say, what's our plan to get there? Then the third step is you actually convert your lazy assets to accelerate investment income. So accelerating investment income means don't let any asset just sit there and accumulate. Turn it on like cash flow. Banks, when they borrow your money, they're trying to create cash flow. They want you to pay monthly. They don't ask you to pay 30 years from now. They ask you to pay monthly. Start thinking more like that. How can I create cash flow? Because if I can create that cash flow, I can get economically independent faster. Then the fourth thing is to scale revenue. This is where investing in yourself comes into plan. You need to be an intrapreneur or an entrepreneur, and if you're willing to do that, you can grow wealth because you can produce more. And financial books miss that far too often. And then the fifth one was the hardest one for me to figure out. Because in my 20s, if someone said, oh, you live up in the mountains, do you ski? I own a business. What are your hobbies? Business. What do you do for fun? Business. I mean, it was the same answer. I just was going to outwork everyone. I remember telling my dad that. I'm like, I'm going to work like no one else will work, so one day, someday I could live like no one else could live. And he goes, son, what about the memories you miss out on along the way? It's like, damn, that's a good point, Dad, right? But the fifth one, make it count. Have a scorecard that's not just financially related. Finance is one of your scorecards, but have a second scorecard of what matters most in life. What engages you? What helps you build the life that you love? What are the things that you enjoy? Maybe it's taking trips, maybe it's having hobbies, maybe it's getting together with friends, but actually enjoying life, because if you're the greatest asset and you take care of yourself, you've got more to give. I've met full-time stay-at-home parents that never leave their kids' side. They do everything for them to the point of exhaustion. They stop doing things for themselves. And they think that that's the right way of doing it. And look, I'm not saying what's right or wrong. I'm just saying that sometimes if you get worn out, quantity doesn't beat quality. And if you all of a sudden do something for everyone else and never do anything for yourself, there's not enough gas in the tank. So Make It Count is about relaxation, rejuvenation, so that you can come back creative, productive, and come back solving those problems, and you keep going through these 5 levers. I call them levers because it's these 5 things. Boost profits or keep more of what you make. Strategically engineer wealth, which is find out that number and reverse engineer it to build cash flow. Take your existing resources and make them cash flow rather than just accumulate, because there's this huge, huge misnomer out there in the world. That Einstein said that compound interest was the 8th wonder of the world. He said compound numbers. In the 1920s, Security National Life lied through their marketing and said he said compound interest through a misquote, which has had people hand their money over to the institutions, wait forever to get measly, tiny bit off their retirement. I don't want people to do that. I want them to take back control of their finances. I want them to utilize this methodology. And they can go through the 4 I's to reclaim cash. They could learn that it's not just about cutting back, it's about efficiency and more production. They could even figure out that all expenses aren't created equal. There's some expenses that are destructive. Let's get rid of those destructive expenses, Let's just eliminate that. Instead, pay cash for lifestyle expenses. Focus on protective expenses. The Rockefellers did. That's why they're 6 generations strong and they keep growing their wealth, for the Vanderbilts didn't have protective expenses. The Rockefellers created a family office, meaning they had an office of financial professionals managing just their family. That helped them perpetuate wealth. The Vanderbilts didn't have that. It was loose. And that's where the point you brought up. Having a financial team, and not just a financial team, just having people that are there to mentor, to coach, to support, not just sell. Right. Not people that are just getting paid a commission, not people that are just paying assets under management, getting a fee. But if we focus on the 4th type of expense, it's the game changer. It's the solution to this, a productive expense. We learn to invest in people. We learn to invest in ideas that we're part of, that we have contribution to. This is an investment for you, right? This is an investment of time for me. We cashed in on relationship capital to do this. We spent a lot of money in mental capital to even share these types of things. We're being a product of the very product that we're talking about.
So people are drinking through a fire hose right now, obviously, ton coming at them, and especially, what does it do? It opens your eyes and said, oh my God, there's so much here to think about, so much here to consider, and I've been kind of living in a blind habit, as compared to saying, there's a whole world here worth exploring. Right. And the psychology can be, oh my God, I feel overwhelmed, or oh my God, this is amazing that
this is possible.
I have all this new world to explore. That could be a really interesting world to explore. And certainly I'm the beneficiary of that exploration.
Right.
So now let's sum it up a bit and say, what is the Garrett Gunderson vision for the future? How do you want to see the world as a result of your efforts?
Well, I see the world where people live their sole purpose, which is the best of who they are. It's really their abilities and it's their passions and their values combined for the highest context of living, where money is not their primary reason or excuse, where they can actually have generational wealth that isn't just money that passes on to the next generation. It's ideas, it's contribution, it's those values, it's the signposts and philosophies that were so helpful and the lessons that they learned along the way that can help people to go further and live the life that they want without being born into financial bondage again, without creating entitled kids. So to me, this is a chance for people to change their family's financial future and overall their family's destiny. I think with a business, I want it to be an ongoing concern, that when I'm gone, it still exists. It still contributes to the world. But I look at the Gunderson family the same way. When I'm gone, I don't want the Gunderson family to be something that I had no impact or influence over or contribution. I want people to figure out their own path in my family. But I want to have symbols, I want to have rituals, I want to have traditions, I want to have philosophies. I have a 52-page philosophy that goes into my estate plan that says whether there's money left in this plan or not. This is a book I want my great-great-great-grandkids to read, to say, how did we navigate life? Knowing that there's certain things that are going to adopt and change, but there's certain timeless principles that we could share, that we've spent millions of dollars painstakingly figuring out from either mistakes or masterminds or great conversations. And it's everything from who we spend, I'll just give one simple example from that. One of the biggest ways I've lost wealth over time was not being more selective with relationships. So inside of my trust, inside of what's called our statement of purpose, I put, hey, we suggest that you create two categories for people, friends and friendly. We don't think that you need to have massive blow-ups or push your values onto someone else or tell them why they're wrong and spend all this energy in getting involved in that drama. Just be friendly with those people. Don't share your vision. Listen to them. Don't commit to anything you're not truly wanting to do. So just say no to their invites and stop inviting them. And then take that extra time and invest it into friends. When I first met you, I knew we would be friends. I knew so much that when you said, oh, I've got this thing coming up, I know it's a week and a half from today, you'd never be able to fly out and make it. I made it because I saw that, because I didn't have to spend time with all the drama people or all the people that don't want to see me succeed or hate my vision or judge me in a negative way. I wanted people I could celebrate with. I want people that when they call me on the phone, I want to answer that call rather than begrudgingly start draining my energy. And it's simple things like that that I wanted to share with my family, because the two worst relationships I let in my life, they were more damaging than the 100 productive relationships in my life during two major events. And you know what? I learned lessons that I wanted to teach my family. Like, just because someone does a favor for you once doesn't mean that you are enslaved to them for the rest of your life and they can abuse you. Just because someone says that you're out of integrity, if integrity was broken because they broke the agreement, you don't have to hold up your end of the bargain anymore. They've already, like things like that I want to contribute, that I think will impact their wealth, but most importantly, I think could save them some of the time. Now, what I do want for them too is a little bit of struggle. What I do want for them is making mistakes, but I want them to make it when there's less at stake and with someone to support them and help pick them up so they could learn a lesson in a more efficient manner. And to me, if I can help people discover that money isn't as complicated as they think, I could simplify it to the point where they're only focused on things that matter to them and they're not spending time on options trading if that's not their thing, or tax liens if they don't understand that, where they could dial it in so that they could actually have more memories along the way and that they could enjoy life and live and express. Because I think all the problems we're facing right now, we have the solutions within people's sole purpose, but money is clouding them from living that. Because if your money ain't right, it's hard to join that fight. You know, if you're not in a good place there, you can't think productively. And one of my friends and yours, Chris Zano, said it really well once. He said, you know what? Money used to be my master, but you really helped me master my money. And money is a byproduct of value, and that value is a place where we store kind of our energy. And I want people to be able to be productive and abundant rather than scarce and destructive.
Well, that was a phenomenal summary. And I really do mean it when I say I appreciate you taking time to share this, because I think that this is as much as people look at money being sort of this material thing and this material pursuit, everything you just described is a spiritual context of what it means to be a human being on planet Earth, to create values, to share those values with others, and to have reverence and respect for the fruits of those labors, so that everything you care about can be the beneficiary of that. So thanks so much, Garrett, for spending time with us here.
Thanks, Patrick.
Now I've got a real treat for you. I interviewed Ray Blanco, and Ray has a huge following because of his ability to research and come up with stock picks, especially in the biotech and crypto areas. So this is a stimulating interview. This guy has got unique intelligence and perspectives that I learned a ton from, things I've never heard before. So you want to really get rid of all distractions, focus, and dial into this interview with Ray Blanco. Ray, I've been looking forward to having this conversation. There's a lot of people saying really nice and great, inspiring things about you, so I'm looking forward to interacting and finding out more about what you're doing.
Great, it's great to be here.
So tell us your background, kind of where you came from and how you ended up being the editor for Seven Figure Publishing that you are today.
Sure, even as a kid, I was kind of a geeky kid, I guess you might say. Big sci-fi buff. I grew up in a world, where Star Trek represented the future. Humanity's made all these amazing discoveries. Remade the economy, is going out to the stars. There's no scarcity or want among the human species. Later on, I went into computer science, and I worked in both the public and private sector. Got to know a little bit about the ins and outs of those things. How Wall Street works on the technological level. And, I started looking at the stock market, technology stocks. As a cancer survivor, I was always interested in emerging biotechnologies and pharmaceutical discoveries and things like that. I mean, if not for discoveries of the past, I would not be here today. So,
Do you mind giving us a little bit more about that? What was your situation?
I was very young. I mean, I had a rough time. I think my mother really had it rough. Mm-hmm. I was about 19, 20 years old. I was diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma. Mm-hmm. Not sure why I got it at such a young age, although it does tend to be one of the more prevalent cancers in young males. Mm-hmm. But, I went through surgery, and I went through radiation, and, knock on wood, it's been almost 25 years now, I think, yeah.
And that got you interested in investigating and understand kind of biotech a little bit more?
Yeah.
So interesting how sometimes personal life experiences can lead you on a career path there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Give you a purpose.
Yeah.
So you had a technology background and had an interest in this, obviously. What was the path that got you into editing these newsletters and getting into the work you're doing today?
Well, it's like anything else. You meet people along the way in life, and, you make a favorable impression on a person. Sometimes opportunity comes from that. And, I ended up working with a person who was a very good friend of mine. He thought I could help him with analyzing technology and, biotech stocks and things of that nature, help him with that process. So, I did that for a while and ended up graduating towards, writing about things myself under my own name. Mm-hmm. And, well, it's been a few years now, and it's been a great experience. Yeah.
So what are your activities today? What are you mostly doing?
So I'm mostly involved in biotechnology, tech. The last few years we've been talking a lot about investment opportunities in the cannabis space, which is emerging as a global thing now. Mm-hmm. We're just in a time of incredible change. Just amazing things are happening. There's so much promise for the future. And what I help my readers with is finding those opportunities in a way that they can act and benefit. And it's a two-way street. So investors enable these new technologies, these world-changing technologies, and at the same time they can profit from it. So you get to do well by doing good. And it's a beautiful thing. And
that's an interesting question, because basically you have a passion for this world, and you're seeing it having some sort of a beneficial effect on humanity and creating this brighter future.
Absolutely.
And at the same time, by investing in it, people can benefit not only from the technology as it emerges, but also from the return on their investment they can make on it.
Right. And, you know, our thesis has been from the beginning, if you invest in a basket of some of the companies, investments participating in, you know, some of the biggest trends in technology or some of the most promising technologies, that you're going to have market-beating performance. And
What do you mean by a basket?
well, you want to spread your bets around, because not every good idea works. Or, you know, it's a good idea, but there's competition that emerges. In biotechnology, not every plausible theory of how to heal a disease survives, you know, the cold hard truth of reality in clinical trials. A lot of drugs never make it. So there's stuff like that. But if you spread your bets around a bit, the winners will by far eclipse your losers, and you're going to end up ahead of the game. And, you know, that's been what we've seen for many years now.
And so this is a part, because I want to dig into some of the things you are betting on or think people should bet on right now. But the strategy is basically take almost like maybe a sector or subsector and saying, hey, there's 3 or 4 or 5 or 7 players in it, and really kind of spread bets around all of them as compared to picking one.
Right.
Can you give like an example of that, that might be current?
Sure. So biotechnology is a good example. You don't want to put all your money in one early stage company working on cancer or Alzheimer's disease. You know, you want to look at, and you got to get them at the right time too. You want to look at a number of them and invest in a number of them. Maybe half of them might not result in what you wanted, but the other ones, especially if they're at the proper stage of development, you know, they're not a huge pharmaceutical company, they're a small cap, and they're still not on the market with any products. Maybe half of them will make it in their late stage, phase 3, and they'll have good results. And, you know, you'll end up, you know, triple, quadruple digit gains on those kinds of companies. And the ones that were failures, you know, you're offset there.
Right. And when you're talking about late stage, you're talking about where they are in FDA as far as the trials and
the
how
clinical
they're
trial
moving along.
process.
And so you're kind of tracking this whole process as it moves along.
Right.
Now, this is interesting because if you look at the whole area of cell therapy and stem cells and other types of cell therapies, it's kind of the wild, wild west right now. So have you been analyzing this and have you been giving some opinions on this?
Yeah. So there's a lot of stuff that gets touted that, in my opinion, after following the space for many years, it's probably never going to yield any benefit. But that doesn't preclude stem cell therapies themselves from, you know, having a lot of therapeutic promise. So, you know, there's companies out there that do have platforms that show a lot of promise. We've already seen some cell-based therapies. They're not stem cells, but, you know, in 2017, the FDA approved 2 cell-based therapies for treating cancer. They're some of the first that we've ever had. We've got, you know, emerging cell therapies to, you know, for regenerative medicine to rebuild tissues that are damaged by disease or aging or things of that nature. So, you know, there's a lot of promise in that area. It's been a long time coming, but I think it's finally starting to mature, that we're starting to get some results in terms of these therapies getting into the market.
Well, what's interesting is a lot of these therapies are in the market, and there's companies that are blossoming and growing out of it, and they're being applied every single day, but there's not necessarily FDA clearance for doing it. How do you think this is all going to shake out?
Well, the U.S. has been difficult for these kinds of therapies. The FDA wants something that you can replicate very deterministically. The problem with cell therapies, there's a lot of variance from person to person. Everybody's genome is different. How you know, if you give somebody stem cells for rebuilding their cardiovascular system, you know, how those cells multiply, divide, and do their thing is very variable. So we need different metrics. The way the FDA has analyzed new therapies in the past, it's kind of a one size fits all, sort of a Model T forward medicine approach where you have large numbers of people, but you know, as we've learned more about the human genome and epigenetics, and you know, we're all we're all snowflakes in a way, right? We need to be able to have a regulatory framework that can allow these more tailored sort of therapies to emerge. But the U.S. isn't the whole world. There's other parts of the world that have their own regulatory frameworks. Japan has been a lot more flexible in this. Now, the FDA is moving in the right direction under its new director, Scott Gottlieb. It's been doing that under his predecessors as well. We're seeing an FDA that's working a lot more with developers with these kinds of new therapies and making it easier for them to bring them to market, make a lot of money, but also help people in need.
So right now, have you been recommending certain stocks or certain companies saying, hey, we think they're on the right path?
Yes.
Relative. So can you talk about those or what you've been writing about?
Oh, well, there's one company I like a lot. It's based in Alameda, California, BioTime. The man that founded the company, he basically, Dr. Michael West, you could say he's the father of regenerative medicine. He wrote the book on stem cells. He spent many years, he's accumulated a lot of intellectual property. He's figured out one of the difficulties of stem cells is how do you manufacture them. And with high quality consistency, the cell culture that you're going to give this person is precise. Those cells are going to differentiate into the right types of adult cells and not into the wrong type. That's a big deal. So he's built this whole cell manufacturing platform. He spun out the technology out of BioTime. We just had an IPO a few months ago using BioTime's technology. The name of the company is Ajax Therapeutics. Dr. West is heading that company now, along with world-famous anti-aging researcher Aubrey de Grey. He's got a big role there, and they've made some discoveries. They ran using basically supercomputers. They ran an analysis of all the changes in a genome as it passes through the embryonic through to the fetal stage, everything that changes, and they found this one switch, which is pretty amazing. It's just mind-blowing. So, as you know, some animals like a lizard, it loses its tail, he can grow it back, right? A crab can lose his claw, you can grow it back. Certain lower forms of life have just a high power of regeneration. And if you go even lower, a flatworm, a planaria flatworm, you can cut it up into 50 pieces and you're going to end up with, 50 flatworms. They all grow back into full-grown worm. So what is this mechanism that they have that we don't? Because, you lose a limb, that's it for life. You cut your spinal cord in an accident and you're paralyzed for life. So they've identified the molecular switch, so to speak, that gets flipped because when we humans are at the embryonic stage of development, we do have this infinite regenerative power. An embryo can lose a limb and it can regrow it. Whereas once you get to the fetal stage, we don't regenerate anymore, we heal. So you get injured, you heal, but it's not, you get a scar, it's never quite the same again. So they're developing drugs that flip the switch on in different disease states. So imagine you have your heart is damaged from a heart attack, and you can flip that switch, and the heart will heal again. It'll be like a new heart again, things like that. They're working on talking about cell-based therapies. They're working on brown adipose tissue cell lines derived from BioTime's original tissue cells. So this is not a very old discovery. A few years ago, they found out that you have this, so everybody's got white adipose tissue, right? That's the fat we all know about and maybe not love so much. Brown adipose tissue is actually found here in the upper part of your back, behind your shoulder blades. And when you're very young, you have a lot of it. And it secretes certain substances into the body that regulate your metabolism. The reason they're brown is they have a lot of mitochondria, which are the power plants of cells, and they burn a lot of calories. Babies, they're small, but they regulate their body temperature pretty well for their sizes because they can turn on that cellular furnace and generate a lot of heat.
Right.
However, as you age, you start to lose these cells. And, the older people get, the more metabolic problems they have, like diabetes. And we're finding out a bunch of other things are tied in to metabolism, all kinds of disease. So, people with diabetes or obesity, this could be a cell therapy that would help them, restore a healthy, youthful metabolism.
So are these companies, or this company in particular, are they going through FDA trials, or are they offering in the market saying, hey, we already
So
have...
they do have some stuff. Ajax is getting there. They're working on getting an investigational new drug into the clinic through the FDA. So this is really pretty early stage stuff. It's kind of swing for the fences, moonshot type of stuff.
Right.
But it's the kind of thing where, if you want to have access to some of these revolutionary technologies, have them as part of a long-term strategy, this is the kind of stuff that you want to invest in.
So that's what I say, is that basically you think it's a good idea to have a basket of
Right.
cell therapy companies at varying stages. You spread some money around there because it's going somewhere.
Yes.
That's interesting. And, I guess the different aspects of that, you have the manufacturing side, you said, who's creating the cells and distributing them. And then I guess you have the clinical application side, who's delivering them to actual patients. Are you a believer in both sides of this from an investment perspective?
Yeah, both sides are going to be valuable. There's going to be money made on both ends of it. You can't have one without the other. Why have the cells if you don't have anything to use them for?
Right.
And you can't have the application without the cells. So you need both sides of it, and both of them are important. And there's other stuff going on. This all involves gene editing as well, and we're seeing some of the first gene therapies hit the market.
So from a biotech standpoint, gene editing is another thing that you think is holding a lot of promise.
Earlier this month, we had some very tantalizing early evidence of in vivo gene editing, possibly having curative properties in humans. So the company's name is Sangamo Biosciences. And they've got a gene editing platform. Everybody talks about CRISPR, right? Everybody knows about CRISPR. And
Incidentally, not everybody might know CRISPR, but
Oh,
if
okay,
you're following this stuff, you understand CRISPR.
so
yeah.
it's a platform where you can go in and go into the DNA of a cell and make changes.
Right.
It's basically a code base, a database, right? The DNA molecule holds a bunch of code, and it's a code of life. But some people are born with some garbled data, and they'll have, various inherited diseases that they've either inherited from their parents. They just got an unlucky gene match between mom and dad, or there was a mutation very early on during their development, and they now have this issue. And most of these, the ones that we can treat, it's lifetime treatment. Some of them involve that you don't produce an adequate enzyme, and you can't break something down in your cells, and it builds up. There's many diseases like this.
Right.
Others might involve, muscular dystrophy. The dystrophin gene, which is incidentally the largest gene in our cells, is got some bad data in it, and you don't produce the dystrophin protein, and you get muscle wasting over time, and you don't live very long in the more severe forms of muscular dystrophy. But what if you could go in with these folks and put in a working gene or edit the bad gene?
And that's so basically what CRISPR does is gene editing.
Yeah, gene editing. Sangamo has a different technology called zinc finger nuclease, but it has the advantage you can go in and with great accuracy edit a gene or insert a gene. The recent data that they presented was for a disease called MPS and MPS2, where they don't produce an enzyme needed to break down a glycoprotein. And so this junk builds up in your cells over time, produces really severe effects and greatly shortened lifespan.
So at what point, when you're seeing technologies like this, which are basically, the research, it's getting published, they're trying to move it on a track to get it out, for commercial use. At what point do you think people should be saying it's a good time to invest in it?
There's different ways to invest. I mean, you can invest early and write it out for a long time, or you can, which is a very viable strategy. Another way you could also trade, right? Which is not quite the same thing as investing. You know, a company's got a major catalyst coming up. It could be, you know, a real big binary event. It could be clinical data. It could be an FDA decision. And, you know, you can do an analysis of what they've got going on and decide, oh, this is a good one to go long on. You know, in 6 months it could be doing pretty well.
So you're placing a bet before an event.
Yes.
And hoping that it
comes out in your favor.
Comes out in your favor.
Yeah.
Now, when you do something like that, do you hedge it somehow, or do you basically just say, okay, I'm pushing these chips onto this bet?
You can.
Yeah.
And there's you know, strategies to do so. Generally, we don't do that in our services. Although that's something that we may be considering in the future. There's different option strategies that you can use, that you can hedge upside and downside and things like that, that are a bit more complex. They're for more sophisticated people.
So for the people that are reading, your research and information and what you're putting out into the world, who are they typically? Are they people that just have some discretionary income and they have an interest in investing in the way that you in the areas or the sectors that you talk about? Like, who's your audience?
My audience is generally people that have worked very hard all their lives. They've done all the right things. They've got a little bit usually of discretionary income, but they want to use that to, they want a little bit more money so they can afford to send their kid to a better school, or they want a little bit more for their own retirement, or they love the game, right? Yeah. They want to be involved in this. It's exciting for them, and they enjoy it, which is perfectly understandable for me too. And they just want to keep abreast of what's going on in these areas and be able to act on it in some way, and benefit themselves. So those are typically the kind of folks that I write for.
So let me ask maybe the opposite question. Who shouldn't be doing this? Like, who shouldn't be like saying, I'm reading your stuff and I want to put money into this. Like, when is that a bad idea?
Well, I mean, you shouldn't invest your nest egg or anything that you can't afford to lose in some of these ideas, because they're pretty speculative. Yeah. And they're high risk, which is why they can be high return, but they are high risk. But if you've got your financial base is set, you got a little mad money that you can play with in these ideas.
Mad money?
Yeah.
I like that, yeah.
Go for it.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. And then so that's the when it's time. So now one of the things you've been writing about that's pretty big is the whole cannabis thing, right? I mean, this is exploding on the scene.
Yes.
And it's multifaceted, right? Because you've got the moral issues of people saying, this is drugs. It's
Right.
the mad reefer days, from that mentality. Right. To the people saying, my God, this is a miracle for so many people, and how it's helping them in their life. And there's all derivatives from medical marijuana to CBD oil, and how people are utilizing that, and hemp oil, and stuff that is legal to trade everywhere. Stuff. Yeah. And you got fights between what the federal posture is on this versus the individual states. So it's exciting, but it's also sort of like, wow, who can try to predict where this is going to end up? So how do you handle it when you write about it?
It's such a greenfield literally greenfield opportunity right now. Yeah. It's like ground level. The closest thing I could compare it to is when the internet was just starting out, right? And you had all these new companies, and people made fantastic, before the bubble popped, right?
Right.
Fantastic gains on those things. I think we're at that stage. We're still at that stage right now. There's companies that are not going to make it. There's going to be a lot of them, a lot of pets.coms out there. And there's some that are going to be the next Amazons and Googles and stuff like that of cannabis. On the moral side, I'm a big proponent of, I'm a very liberty-oriented person in that sense. I mean, alcohol and tobacco are illegal, and they're not necessarily good for you if you don't use them, and if you don't use them in moderation, right? I think cannabis is probably in the same camp. It's not despite all the fear mongering of the past decades, it's not a truly dangerous drug. I mean, we know this. We've known it for a long time. I think it's been kind of a travesty. We've put so many people in prison that were otherwise law-abiding citizens.
Right.
You know, they're not engaged in any kind of violence or anything like that. It really wrecked a lot of lives. We spent billions of dollars fighting the market. And then, you know, in the end, market always wins. People want something, they're going to get it one way or another.
And that's an interesting thing, as you're saying, is the market wins because exactly, there's always a market for it, legal or illegal.
Yeah.
And eventually the market won out on this one. And it's unfolding right now that the market continues to win out.
So what I think is we've had here in the United States is, for many, many years, a very dedicated, relatively small group of people that have been pushing and pushing and pushing the issue. And they have gradually changed the opinion of the majority. It started with medical. There's been so many amazing stories on the medical side, just life-changing stories. And it's, you know, it's just a profound stupidity. We've been sitting on this for so many years, and who knows the stuff we'd have right now if we had allowed at least medical research, more medical research. So I think on the medical side is where people said, how can we not let others have access to this if it helps them? It's not humane.
Right.
But that, you know, so that's the gateway drug to the recreational side, right? They always called marijuana the gateway drug to the hard stuff, although there's evidence now that it's the exit drug from the hard stuff. There's some evidence of that. So, you know, people have become more relaxed. I mean, we've actually got majority of the country now thinks that recreational should be okay. What we've seen in the United States for quite a few election cycles now is we see ballot initiatives, and state after state after state, you know, my own state, Florida, in 2016 finally allowed medical. You know, I've seen it help family members with different autoimmune conditions and things like that. So, you know, we've seen states going medical, and then we have a smaller number of states that are allowing adult use or recreational use. There's a lot of problems with implementation right now, you know, especially at the federal level, where it's still a highly restricted substance. It's such a bizarre situation. So you've got the National Institutes of Health that holds a patent on cannabinoids because of their medical neuroprotective properties.
The NIH can have its own patents?
Yeah, well, they do, and then they license those patents. A lot of good stuff comes out of the NIH.
Wow, but isn't that kind of strange? Because that means they're in the when they license it, are they making a profit from the license, or how does that work?
They can. I mean, I don't know the whole story of how the NIH licenses out some of the stuff it discovers. A lot of the stuff it discovers is really, really, really early stage. So if they license it to a pharmaceutical company, they got to do the hard work. So they discovered this drug target or this mechanism. They maybe even discovered a molecule that does something very interesting that might alter a disease state. So
Well, this is interesting because, you know, if it's tax dollars, you know, that funded the NIH, and they create patents, that should be public property where anybody should be able to use it. I mean, from a libertarian standpoint,
that's
at least.
true, but who's going to spend $200 million bringing this idea to market?
Well, I get it, but now anybody should be able to utilize the IP. Is my point, as compared to them, you know, being able to decide what company gets to use this and what doesn't.
In a perfect world, that might be true, but if you don't have exclusivity, it's very unlikely that you're going to invest
the money to take it to market.
And take all the risk on. Because, you know, from discovery stage through to market, you know, more than 90% of the stuff here never makes it. It's plausible, it looks good, but it'll fail in early trials or in mid-stage, or heaven forbid, even in late stage after you've spent 5-10 years and you've put tens of millions of dollars in.
So this is interesting. So from the investment standpoint, so now we've got, you know, what we're looking at environmentally in this, and I'm talking about the financial or investment environment. You've got literally a federal government who's had this great opposition to marijuana. Now, but yet the federal government holds patents on uses.
It's like one hand and the other not knowing what they're doing, right?
They're operating independently.
So the DEA says this is a highly dangerous substance with no known medical applications.
Right.
And then you got the NIH that holds a patent on the neuroprotective properties of cannabinoids.
Right.
So it's just bizarre.
Yeah, it's bizarre. So we can go with the people who've done the science, and we can go with the people who just have hysteria that they've inherited.
Yeah, and the thing is, government bureaucracies, after a while, they become self-serving.
Right.
And their biggest job is to continue to exist and to grow.
Yeah.
And for the DEA to willingly reschedule or remove, marijuana is listed up there with heroin and cocaine.
Yeah,
and
it's crazy.
all this kind of stuff.
So now I'm the investor.
Yeah.
I'm excited about the prospects. Yet we spend a few minutes here talking about how crazy, it's like crazy land here, as far as the regulatory side of this and state governments, federal government contradiction and all that kind of stuff. So now, but let's say I'm excited about this. I've got some discretionary money. I want to put some money into this or place some bets on this. How do I sort this out? Or when you're writing about this, where are you guiding people?
Well, I mean, I'm taking the approach, and we take both the long and short-term approach in different publications. The long-term approach, I think, is to invest in the best quality cannabis companies out there, which have tended to be Canadian, and even that's not perfect. There's been some stuff that's gone on. Canada's been a really early frontier. They were early at the national level with medical. And they've been early also with the adult use, and the implementation has been bumpy, but they've got the most mature, well-capitalized companies there. You can speculate on some of these itty-bitty ones, and that's fine. But on the long-term side, I think that's the best way to go. There's opportunities emerging all over the world. I don't necessarily think Canada is going to be the epicenter of cannabis production. I mean, they're not the epicenter of banana production for a reason. They don't have the climate for it, right? Although you can grow bananas in Canada if you want to spend the money on a greenhouse and climate control. So there's going to be other parts of the world that are going to I think, eventually be the leaders.
Have you recommended any particular companies or initiatives in the cannabis world for investment thus far?
Well, late last year I visited Colombia, and I'm a little bit familiar with what's been going on over there. So I was in the Medellin area, which is very famous. If you watch Narcos on Netflix and Pablo Escobar and all that, right? So that place is somewhat infamous, undeservedly so, because it's a beautiful city and it's a beautiful area. But that area, and also around Bogota at the proper elevations, it's a cut flower powerhouse. So we used to grow a lot of flowers in North America. We don't grow quite as many as we used to, just because climate is king. Over there, you're in the tropics, so you don't get a lot of seasonal variation in sunlight. You have at the right altitude, you have the perfect temperature for chrysanthemums. A little bit higher, you have the perfect temperature for roses year round. And all you need is a very simple open air, clear plastic greenhouse to keep the rain from hitting the plants and causing mold or mildew on the leaves and the flowers. And they've already got an established labor base, expert in working flowers.
And but are they taking investment in these particular?
They're starting to flip into cannabis. My understanding is it was an obscure law on the books. Cannabis is not legal in Colombia, but it's only legal for medical, but there was no regulatory framework. So they worked and they created a regulatory framework, and just like they took over, maybe not the majority of the world's flower production, but I think pretty close to it. I think they're going to be pretty big in cannabis production, maybe to do it a lot cheaper than in some other places. And at the end of the day, as the industry matures, if you can be a low-cost, high-quality producer better than others, then you're going to be, the mass market winner.
So you're talking about the farming side right now.
Right.
So then you got farming, you probably have, wholesale distribution, and then you've got the retail side of it, and I'm probably in the recreational space more than the medical space speaking to this. So do you think, where do you think the best place is to go invest? Is it on the farming production side, the wholesale, retail, all the above?
The thing is, a lot of the really good companies, and even a lot of the not so strong companies, are pretty much trying to be complete vertical, where they have production, where they transform the product into oils or tinctures and extracts,
Right.
and then their own retail. They want to be complete.
Vertically integrated.
Yeah, they want to have the whole vertical. So a lot of them will have that. Some are specializing in just either production or just branding and retail and stuff like that.
Yeah, because I'm seeing now there's some people vying for brand development and brand awareness, and that's starting to merge now. Like I'm hearing a lot of commercials for I
Yeah,
think
you can have
MedMen.
Coca-Cola.
Yeah, and they exactly.
And that's going to happen eventually.
And do you think that's a good place to place a bet, saying, hey, these people are starting to develop a known brand, and so they're
You want to spread the bets around.
yeah, kind of like Bitcoin might be to crypto in general. It's like
You want to spread it around.
You want to spread it around.
It's really hard to say who's ultimately going to be the Amazon of this or the Coca-Cola. Although that's, as industries mature, they always tend to consolidate into a few big players. And then you might have a few bit players doing, you've got Budweiser and Miller and all this stuff in beer, but then you got the little microbreweries. You've got that.
Yeah, it's like specialty coffee
Right.
versus Starbucks or something. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think the most also a very exciting thing is the medical side. Believe it or not, there's going to be a big market, and there is a big market for cannabis-derived pharmaceuticals that will be covered by insurance. Will be a very pure, proven product. There's a lot of work there. Last year we saw the first ever FDA approval of a directly cannabis-derived therapy. British company GW Pharmaceuticals. They got the FDA to approve. Epidiolex is the name of the products. It's for children with certain rather rare forms of epilepsy. So, they had clinical data showing that they could cut seizures down in half. These kids are getting everything we've already got.
And I have to imagine that the adverse effects are nil because it's derived from plant in such a way as compared to something that might be more toxic.
Well, yeah, it's not toxic. I mean, the deadly dose of cannabis is incredibly, incredibly high, much higher than the therapeutic dose. So it's inherently safe.
Right.
So they developed this therapy for. I mean, they've got other stuff going on at this company. I mean, they've got some really tantalizing early stage data. They've got another cannabis extract that showing, and I hope they take it further in trials. It can make a real difference in brain cancer.
Wow. Wow.
So there's a lot of stuff going on there.
So, what is it about your writing or what you do? Why are you so popular? Why is your newsletter? Why are they so popular? And I know it might seem like you don't want to self-aggrandize, but I'm literally like saying there seems to be this sort of like I don't know if it's your style, your content, a combination of it, but people really love what you write.
Well, objectively, we do really well. Our averages every year, at the end of the year, I calculate our average gain, and I mean, we just do really well. So there's that, and I love what I do. I mean, this job is just amazing. I get to talk to amazing people every day, learn new things. There's just so much cool stuff going on, and you see so many people just dedicated, dedicating their lives to, healing disease or inventing new technologies and things like this. It really gives you hope in humanity. We're pretty, there's a lot of good stuff out there, a lot of good people.
So I'm wondering, like, how you see this, because, a lot of times when people think about investment or even trading in the market and doing these types of things, it's almost very mercenary in its feel. It's like, I just want to go make money. But you seem to have this sort of hope for humanity in the work that you're doing. It's not, I mean, obviously, yes. You're talking about, hey, we do well. We get great returns. We calculate our advice and see what the impact is for people who follow it, and that's the money side. But there seems to be a spiritual nature to this with you. So tell me how you experience it.
Yeah, I mean, I get to be immersed in and document human progress. It's this, long story we've had. We, as a species, we take 2 steps forward, we go 1 step back. Bad things happen, but as a general rule, things have just been getting better and better. You know, compared to our grandparents and great-grandparents lived. As society becomes wealthier, there's things that are not so great, but I think we're more free to have empathy for each other because we're not so scared about our own personal survival, that we're more free to reach our individual potential. Plus, it's just as fascination finding out how the world works. Human biology, we've been talking about that a bit today, right? It's just such a fascinating, intricate piece. If you look at it as a machine, which I don't know if that's exactly right, but it's just so cool. How did all this come about? It's just amazing. And we're learning new stuff all the time. The nice thing about what I do is it's never boring. And I get to learn new stuff every day, and I get to share it with other people. So, pretty lucky guy right here.
We've certainly have had a lot of conversations in this documentary series around cryptocurrency and blockchain, and spent a lot of time at Overstock.com. Now, that's a pick that you had early on that seemed to go very well with you. What's your view on the whole crypto blockchain thing?
So I am quite skeptical on cryptocurrency. I like the idea of an alternative monetary system that can't be manipulated by the central banks. So I like the idea. I'm just somewhat skeptical about the implementation. Now, the foundational technology of crypto, is blockchain. This mysterious person invented it back in, I think it was 2009, when everything was melting down, and he invented it to enable cryptocurrency. I think blockchain, and there's derivatives of that, is a world-changing idea because it's decentralizing, and it makes trust between 2 people that don't know each other possible without an intermediary. So what I liked about Overstock was their involvement with Medici Ventures and all of the startups that they were funding. They were building an exchange, T0, which was going to be the world's first SEC-compliant, secure, distributed, blockchain-based equities and securities exchange, right? And that was a really cool idea because, Patrick Byrne, who's the guy behind all this, he's been pointing out the rapaciousness and mercenary nature of Wall Street and the things that they do, like naked short selling. He wanted to make this whole process transparent, and some of these practices that are performed in Wall Street make them impossible and level the playing field between everybody. So that's what T0 is attempting to do. But they're doing other amazing things. Blockchain, secured and enabled voting. One idea that they have that's very exciting that they're working on is a global property registry. Which here in the United States, we really don't realize how good we've got it. I can look up any property anywhere in the country and see the entire chain of ownership going back who knows how far, right? And, if I own a property, it's legally not dubious at all. It's very solid. I can do what I want with it within the law.
But not true in the third world.
It's not true in a lot of places.
Yeah.
I've looked at real estate overseas, and it's like, how do I know this person that's selling me this really owns it?
Right. It seems that the investment world / banking world is rigged and has been rigged for people of privilege. The insiders, got the right line, knows the right people, can get the right input and advice. And working people, guys like me who go to work every day, who maybe even make pretty good money or what have you, and maybe might have discretionary money to invest, just don't have the avenue or the connections, if you will, to be able to do it and with wisely, to be able to have some sort of context for it. So is there a part of that the nature of the David and Goliath? You got these big monsters out there who are just profiting all the time, and we're frozen out. That what you do and the type and other people like you do
is the line that, the connection we can have to try to make good investment?
Yeah, so the driving idea there is we're a marketplace of ideas. We're a number of insiders and experts. All of us are employed in our day-to-day work, looking after our families. We don't all have the time to be insiders or be experts. So, we offer, me and my colleagues, and we all have different areas of expertise. What we offer is that expertise that does help level the playing field. Many of my colleagues have worked at hedge funds, have been money managers, things like that. And now they're offering their services for, regular folks, so that they can take advantage and, actionable opportunities. It's not just for entertainment value, although some stuff is very entertaining.
Right.
But actionable ideas that our readers can use to achieve their goals and to better themselves.
Yeah, to feel like we got access to that information and can say, hey, I like this field that you're talking about in cannabis or biotech or even blockchain, and I can go in there and say I'm going to put some money into this particular company after reading. But I suspect that the way that you write, it's entertaining or intellectually stimulating in and of itself, and then every once in a while something resonates and you place a bet.
Right.
So it's really kind of this, I think, a great emerging service that you can get this out to the everyday people as compared to just the people who live this stuff every day and kind of it's incestuous in their own world that they kind of just support each other. So it's great, and I very much appreciate you sharing this and your wisdom with me and what you do every day of your life.
Well, it's been great. I've really enjoyed this conversation.
So now you know. Ray is an editor of 3 different newsletters with a huge following, all of them successful, and you can understand why. He's got solid advice, he's very authentic, and everyone can benefit from his wisdom. Terrific being with you during episode 2. I hope you got a ton of value out of it. Will you join us in our mission to get this out into the world? It's a free viewing right now. There's people that that you care about that will benefit from this information. So just go ahead and share this with them. Have them join us for the rest of this free viewing. And again, thank you for watching episode 2 of Money Revealed.
I don't know that there's anything financially that more people are involved in that they have less knowledge about than plans like the 401k. This is at a time where we have a stock market at all-time highs. Behind the curtain, it's growing at 8%. So here's the question, where'd the money go?
The middle class are people who may have a little bit of money, but most of the time they end up spending what they have. And the challenge with that is your business will always be a mirror of yourself. I was trying to make businesses make money, but I wasn't myself being cash flow positive. I wasn't reinvesting the money, buying properties, buying assets, making sure they were making money for me. Why would the money come my way? Money's always trying to find the best home. And if I'm not able to appreciate the money won't appreciate.